Naja, who will be the presenter for this seminar. Dr. Vanaja needs no introduction. She has completed her UG, PG, and PhD from Aish Mysuru and was a former professor of audiology in Aish. Presently, she is the principal, School of Audiology and Speech Language Pathology, Bharati Vidyapeeth, deemed to be University, Pune. She is the proud recipient of Professor Padma Shri S. Kameshwaran Oration Award by Isha and has won several Best Paper awards at various national conferences. She has served as a member of expert committee of the Rehabilitation Council of India, was the president of MISHA and editor of GISHA. Madam has completed 6 research projects, has 28 publications in international journals, 34 in national journals, and 11 chapters in books or proceedings to her credit. She has developed multiple tests of auditory processing disorder assessment, and we are indeed very fortunate to have her as the speaker for our next session. Welcome to you, ma'am, and over to you.
Yes, thank you, Deep. You can hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
At the outset, thank you, Misha, for inviting me for this talk. And like I've been telling Misha people, I've been talking to you people too many times. Should I really be a speaker? That was the first question I asked. So
And
for
our
some of
answer is
you,
always yes.
It's our honor, ma'am.
for some of you who have heard me earlier, some of the slides or some of my talk may be repetitive, but then I need to keep everything to cover the whole topic. So I've maintained it. And thank you, Deepa, for your nice introduction. Wait, just give me 2 minutes. You're able to see my slides?
Yes, ma'am, but your video is off.
It is a nice topic. Misha came up with saying that looking beyond audiogram, because most of the time in clinics, the
I think ma'am has some network issues. We'll just get her back in soon. She seems to have dropped out of the meeting.
Yeah, we can just wait for a minute for her.
overcome these problems. And this problem has been described by various names over the years. The first name that was there was saying King-Kopsky syndrome, because it was based on the people who described this condition. Then people talked of obscure auditory dysfunction, and then it could be auditory processing disorder, hidden hearing loss. In all these conditions, describe a condition where the pure tone audiogram may be normal, but people will have speech understanding problem. So the King-Kopsky syndrome was described as loss of ability to discriminate sounds in presence of noise. It is based on the people who first described it. And they said that people will have clinically normal hearing threshold, but yet they have problem in understanding. So basically that at that time, everything was thought of like audiogram is the key to hearing. So if audiogram is normal, then there is no problem with auditory system is what was thought. So in that context, they said it may be more of a functional problem or a psychogenic problem. And they called it as, basically it is an auditory stress disorder is what was finally decided at that time. And then Sanders and Haggard described obscure auditory dysfunction, where again they said people with clinically normal hearing will have problem in understanding speech in presence of noise. Again, they said there can be many factors affecting here. It could be maybe because I have a language problem, so it could be linguistic problem, it could be auditory problem, or psychological factors, or an interaction of all three can play a role here. And then we have this hidden hearing loss, which is being described more recently, where people have normal hearing, yet they have difficulty in understanding speech. And this has been pathophysiologically been attributed to a loss in the cochlear synapse, and which most often occurs because of noise exposure and ototoxicity. So this is typically an adult onset because it happens due to exposure to loud noise or because of ototoxicity. So it can occur in children also, but it is being seen more often in, it can be seen more often in adults. But right now, we do not really have any clinical test to diagnose this cochlear synaptopathy. So we have to assume that when people are exposed to noise or had ototoxicity and have difficulty in understanding speech, but the audiogram is normal, they could be having synaptopathy. There are some research going on to see whether electrocochleography, summating potential, action potential, cochlear microphonic, a combination of all these can really help in differential diagnosis, but we are yet to come up with an answer for clinically diagnosing these patients. And the other one is auditory processing disorder. All of you know what auditory processing disorder is, which is being most often described in children, and a lot after children, we most often we talk about auditory processing disorder in older adults. Auditory processing disorder in young adults is most often not talked so much about. Initially, it was also saying that there is no point in describing or diagnosing auditory processing disorders because we don't really have a management strategy. We do not have a treatment for it. But later on now we know that we do have management strategies for auditory processing disorder. So it is important to diagnose auditory processing disorder in adults also. So the prevalence of auditory processing disorder in children is reported to be 2 to 5% based on Charmak and Music. An Indian study by Muthuselvi and Yatiraj says that about 3.2% are probably at risk for auditory processing disorder. And then they talk of auditory processing disorder in older adults. So the older adults, the Cooper and Gates study, that actually it ranges from 22.6% to even higher percentage also in persons with presbycusis. Even when we did a dissertation on older adults, we found that like at least more than 50% of people with SN hearing loss had auditory processing problem. But we don't really have an estimate in young adults what is the incidence or prevalence of auditory processing disorder. And there are some studies which say that 5% of adults with normal hearing do have auditory processing problem. And this is based on the cause this study is saying 58% of population recovered from closed head injuries will have long-term auditory processing issues. So basically now it depends, that is only in those head injury patient, it is 58%. If you take the general population, the incidence is very low. Now, what are the causes of auditory processing disorders? We all know that one of the major causes is brain injury, head trauma, meningitis. So any of these can lead to auditory processing disorder. One of the example of head injury and then having auditory processing disorder is the pioneer in auditory processing disorder, Bellis. I don't know, we must have read about Bellis' story where she had a closed head car accident and a closed head injury, after which she developed auditory processing problem. Other causes that can happen for auditory processing disorders in adult is cerebrovascular disorder. And a lot of times when there's cerebrovascular disorder, there are other language problem and auditory processing problem. So it actually becomes very difficult to assess auditory processing. Most often we don't really diagnose auditory processing disorder per se here because it's very difficult to administer any of our tests in this population. Electrophysiological tests can be done. So sometimes we do have done electrophysiological tests where it shows abnormalities saying that auditory processing per se is affected in this population. And then we have degenerative disorders where the processing can be affected depending on where the lesion is, where the degeneration is. And then exposure to neurotoxins is reported to cause auditory processing disorder. Personally, I haven't really come across anybody with exposure to neurotoxins and then having hearing auditory processing disorder, but it's been reported in literature. Other causes is any lesion in the central nervous system, for example, or the seizure disorder, the temporal lobe epilepsy, especially when they do the resection of temporal lobe to control epilepsy, they could be having auditory processing problem. And we have seen cases like that where auditory processing problem has started because of resection to control temporal lobe epilepsy. And rarely it can happen that auditory processing disorder may be present since childhood, but it gets noticed only in adulthood. That is because it depends on the need to understand speech. And most of, again, when we know that auditory processing disorder is not something that we always have problem in understanding speech. It's always understanding speech in difficult situation. So more maybe in a noisy background or maybe in multiple people are speaking, only in such conditions we have a problem. So sometimes as a child, a person may not realize that he has a problem, but during adulthood, it may come to notice. Like for example, one such example I always remember is sometime in 1990s, there was a Christian priest who came and told me that I cannot hear well in the left ear. I cannot understand well in the left ear. And the reason he said that was saying that he, being a priest in a church, he has to listen to the confession. So when he said, when people speak to me in the left ear, I do not understand, whereas in the right, I do. And when we did a lot of tests to check his processing in both right and left, and sure enough, the results showed that there was a auditive processing was poorer in left ear compared to the right ear. But 1990s, I didn't really know that, okay, we can do auditory training to help these people. So I just explained to him saying that, yes, you do have a problem, but maybe you have to give your right ear for the confession or the counseling I did. And I didn't really talk to him about training his left ear to improve further. And similarly, I've also had a couple of adults who had said that, okay, when I start using left phone on the left ear, I have a problem, whereas on the right, I don't have so much. And this is like I'm saying in 1990s, what would happen is maybe during the childhood days, they did not use the telephone so much. And then when they started using it for their work purpose, they found it more a problem. So, but a lot of times what do happen is also that a person may have an auditory processing disorder, but during by the time a person is adult or working, then they will have compensatory strategies for it. So they may not really realize that they have a problem, or even if they know they have a problem, they know how to cope with it. So they will not really come to a professional for help. So now what really is a mystery of this auditory processing disorder in adult is that, like, what is the complaint is really will vary depending on what exactly is happening in a particular person. This is, I just put the story of Bellis because it's there in her book. If any of you have read it, saying she has a biography where she's written When Brain Can't Hear. And that is her own life story where she says that actually, I mean, I'm assuming that everybody knows who Bellis is. Bellis is an expert in auditory processing disorder, and she actually acquired this problem after she graduated. She was working actually as an audiologist in some university, and she was basically into electrophysiological testing and mainly into intraoperative monitoring. And she said after the head injury, she realized that it was difficult for her to hear all this. When you're doing intraoperative monitoring for electrophysiology, most often they monitor both 8th nerve and 7th nerve condition. And with the seventh nerve, there is always a tick sound which comes whenever the facial nerve is stimulated. So it's very important that that sound is heard by a person who is monitoring. So she said that she couldn't really clearly hear these sounds. So then she had to stop being working in intraoperative monitoring and then started working more into auditory processing at that time. And she didn't really have problem in speech understanding, she says, because she was able to overall in general understand speech. It was her problem was not really speech understanding in noise, but she felt that it was more in terms of the prosody. She said that everybody, she felt other people were speaking in odd tones, or they're speaking sarcastically, or it is very abrupt, their speeches. And then she realized she's not understanding jokes or puns. And when she consulted the doctor said, post concussion, all these things will happen. So you will recover this problem. It is so basically they did not relate it to any auditory processing problem or any problem in the auditory system. And in fact, she says she also didn't get herself tested initially for auditory processing. And she was demonstrating the electrophysiological test for the internship students. And then when the cortical potentials were being done, she realized that there was a reduction in the amplitude of cortical potentials. And as we normally say, okay, the student must have done some mistake. So she made him redo the whole thing, saying because he's only an internship student. But still it was reduced. And then she ran all the tests on herself and realized that pitch pattern test she failed, and the left ear scores were poorer on dichotic tests. And all these tests which she had done previously, she did have normal results. And later on, she found this problem which indicated that there is auditory processing disorder. So what I'm trying to say here is that she, being an audiologist, it was difficult to diagnose. So when this happens in a common person, and many times it goes missed. So professionals don't realize that it could be a problem. Patients don't realize that it can be a problem in auditory processing. So they relate it to all other aspects. So there is a need to educate other allied professionals or the medical professionals regarding auditory processing problem, and a general awareness saying such problem can exist in adults, and then we can do something to assess and rehabilitate. How do we assess? How do we assess central auditory processing? The central auditory processing assessment in adults and children are similar. There is no difference between how we assess in adults and how we assess in children. Only difference is being in terms of the norms we have, and maybe some of the tests material can vary between what we use for adults and children. So basically we talk of assessing four main processes. One is a temporal processing. So that is processing of time related aspects. How does the brain process, auditory system process the time related process? Then we have auditory closure or auditory suppression. That is, if there is noise and speech, can we identify speech in presence of noise, or can we identify the missing auditory cues? So can we fill in the blanks? If you don't know, for example, these webinars are a typical example of this, where suddenly there will be a loss of connectivity for few seconds. Maybe you do not hear me clearly, but yet you'll be able to understand because you do the coach as part of it. So can we fill in the missing blanks? And then we have binaural interaction. That is, can we assimilate and make sense of stimulus coming from two sides, that is from the right side and the left side, and then say, for example, localization, lateralization, all these are examples of binaural interaction. And then we assess binaural integration. Binaural integration is hearing something in the right ear, hearing something in the left ear. If I'm hearing two different things, one in right ear, one in left ear, am I able to understand both? Am I able to get at least some meaning of what is heard in both? The difference between integration and interaction is, in interaction, we combine the information presented to the two ears and then give a meaning. In integration, the right ear is understood as it is, and left ear is understood as it is. So I'm able to get information presented to right ear as well as left ear. There are some authors who say both interaction and integration are same, and they just put a slash for binaural interaction / integration. But there are some who differentiate, and I would like to differentiate between the two. Interaction occurs more at the level of brainstem. Integration occurs more at the cortical level. And then we have binaural separation, that is stimulus presented to right ear and left ear, or right side and left side. Can I differentiate between the two, like ignore one and pay attention to the other? So for example, if I'm talking over telephone and my son is talking to me, can I ignore what my son is saying and then talking over telephone, or the other way around also? So can we ignore one signal and then pay attention to the only other? That would be a binaural separation task. And the next is auditory memory and sequencing. Again, there's a controversy as to whether auditory memory and sequencing should be really considered under auditory processing, or it is a higher cognitive ability. So it is a more a global problem. That is, if a person has problem in auditory memory and sequencing, so it may be more that a person has overall problem in memory and cognition. Is it that way? But there are some recent studies by Yatiraj and a PhD student where it says that when you do test older individuals for auditory memory and global memory, they found that the two were not correlated, meaning there was no correlation between auditory memory scores and the global memory scores, indicating that auditory memory is modality specific. So if a person may have deficiency in auditory memory, but may not have deficiency in visual memory. So we need to check this under auditory processing skills. Now, just a brief overview of what tests are available for testing each of these. There are many tests that are available, and what happens is that we may or may not have all the tests to assess, but even if we have one test for testing each of these processes, that should be good enough for us to tell whether a person has auditory processing problem or not. I have not gone into the details of these tests, but yeah, I just want to say that we do have these tests available in many of the Indian languages, or many Indian norms are available for those who want to do it clinically. Okay. So one of the common tests that is used for temporal processing is temporal ordering. So temporal ordering is either pitch pattern or duration pattern test is used over here. And that is, if I present a sequence of low frequency, high frequency sound, then am I able to process it in the order in which I heard? So that, for example, I present low frequency, high frequency, and then again a low frequency, and I repeat it in the same sequence. Am I able to understand that, process it, and then repeat it in the same sequence? That is what is checked in pitch pattern test. In temporal resolution, I think Ajit has already talked about the gap detection test or the gap in noise test, where can we identify a silence in a tone, or can we identify a silence in a signal? So that is basically the gap detection test. Temporal discrimination, again, Ajit did talk about the temporal modulation transfer function, which they're done on ANSD people. Or the other simple test for temporal discrimination is also duration discrimination. And temporal integration test, that is, can our brain integrate energy over time? And then if I present a long duration signal, the threshold should be better than a threshold for short duration signal. In other words, if I present a tone of 20 milliseconds, and if I present a tone of 200 milliseconds sounds louder than a 20 milliseconds tone. So can my auditory system process that or not is checked in temporal integration. Then we have tests for auditory closure, that is basically understanding in presence of noise, or understanding a signal which is time compressed, or it is low pass filtered speech. That is, we know that speech consists of a range of frequencies. So if I cut off all the high frequencies which are important for understanding consonants, and I present only till 500 hertz or 800 hertz, can I still understand the speech? That is low pass filtered speech. So what happens here is whatever is missed because the high frequencies are cut, that has to be filled in by our auditory system. So that is why it is called as auditory closure, filling in whatever is missing. So similarly, in a time compressed speech, like whatever is say recorded in 1 minute, I compress it to 30 seconds. So what in the process, what happens is there are many segments which will be cut over there. So when some segments are cut, are we still able to process the speech and understand? So that will be time compressed speech. And the other one is the most often commonly done test, that is speech in presence of ipsilateral noise. That is both speech and noise are present for the same ear. So can we understand this? The next series we have is binaural interaction test. Binaural interaction tests, like I said, check when I present something to the right ear and left ear, am I able to integrate the two signals and process it? So one of the most common good test for binaural interaction is masking level difference. But like as Ajit pointed out, masking level difference is not available in all audiometers. So we may have to go for other tests like binaural fusion test. That is, I present a low pass filtered speech in right ear and a high band pass filtered speech in the left ear. So I can integrate stimuli presented to the two ears and then understand what is being presented. So that would be a binaural fusion test. So like that, similarly, we have other tests also which can assess binaural interaction. I mean, I'm not going into the details of these tests. If there are questions, we can have a discussion on any of these tests. Binaural integration, we do have tests which can assess whether we can process what is presented in both right and left ear simultaneously. So most commonly used tests for these are dichotic tests. The dichotic tests are done using either consonant vowels, digits, words, rhyming words, or sentences. So what is done in here is the right ear hears say pa and left ear hears ta. So I should be repeating that I heard pa and ta. So if I don't repeat both the signals, that means my binaural integration is not working. So dichotic digit would be, instead of presenting consonant vowel, I present digits. Say 1 and 2 is present to the right ear, and in the left ear I hear 4, 5. So am I able to repeat all? Most often in dichotic digit test, a digit pair is used. So I have to repeat 4 words, I have to repeat 4 digits, I have to repeat and say whether I heard it or not. So similarly, we have dichotic word test where you present one word. Basically, the concept is same. You have two different stimuli in the two ears. So it can be in the form of any of the stimuli, words or sentences or a rhyming word. And these tests, like I've been saying, are available in different Indian languages. And many of the training institutes have developed it, but they can be procured from the training institutes for use by clinicians. Binaural separation test is where I'm separating what is heard, I mean, ignoring what is heard presented to one ear and repeating what is heard in the other ear. Basically, all the tests are used for the binaural integration. The dichotic test can also be used for binaural separation. The major difference is that in integration, I say repeat whatever is heard. So what is heard in right ear as well as what is heard in left ear has to be repeated. In separation, I tell them to repeat only what is heard in the right ear, or say repeat only what is heard in the left ear. So all aspects are important and all are interrelated, of course. So the auditory memory in sequencing tests is a part of many of the speech language tests also, where we ask the person to repeat the words heard or to repeat the digits heard. So you can have special tests specifically designed for this, or you can also use any of the other available tests for checking this auditory memory in sequencing. So as you all know, memory is just repeating in any order. Sequencing would be if the person repeats it in the same order. If I whatever order it was presented, the same order if a person repeats, and auditory sequencing is good. And many a times it so happens that when we're testing in adults, both memory is affected and even the other aspects may be affected, and one can have an influence on the other. So most often when you're doing auditory processing tests, my general rule is always check the auditory memory first and then start doing the other tests. We do have the other prerequisites before doing central auditory processing tests. That is, one is essentially we say that all these tests have good sensitivity and specificity when a person has normal hearing, but we can also do these tests when people have hearing loss. Okay, so we do, but the administration and interpretation need to be done cautiously when a person has hearing loss, but we cannot do it when a person has too much of hearing loss. Most often we have done it when a person has a mild hearing loss, mild symmetrical hearing loss. We can do it sometimes maybe moderate hearing loss, but if it is more than that, it becomes difficult. And we need to check the language abilities. So we have to assume, we can administer many of the tests only when the language ability is good. Otherwise, we have to go for non-linguistic tests. So basically, I choose the test material depending on what the individual person's ability is. And of late, there is also a stress on testing cognition because many of the older individuals do have declining cognitive abilities also. So I'm sure all of you have been reading a lot on hearing loss and declining cognitive ability. One can lead to the other, like hearing loss, person with hearing loss may have more problem with cognition, or that can lead to cognitive problem. And there are now tests which are also trying to integrate the two. So there recently people have come up with tests which are called as integrated speech recognition and working memory test. So rather than testing only working memory and testing only speech recognition, combine both in test. Again, basically this concept is not very new because they say that as early as in 1995, also there was a called as SPIN-R, meaning speech in noise test with a delayed recall, spin recall it is called as. So a sentence is presented in presence of noise, and after a delay, again asked to recall what was presented. And similarly, there was a test which is also called as word auditory recognition and recall measure, where you're assessing a person's ability for speech understanding or word recognition, as well as recall. And recently, the WIDEX has come up with this integrated repeat recall test. So in this integrated repeat recall test, what is done is you're doing speech in noise test and use the speech in noise test to assess different parameters. That is a person's ability to repeat, person's ability to recall, person's ability to use the context, and a person's ability to, listening effort and the tolerable time. So this test is fairly, at least it's new to me, and I don't know of any such test in Indian languages at present. There may be something which I don't know. And what is done in this test is actually the speech in noise test is similar to what is normally have. That is, you have sentences presented in presence of noise, and you have keywords over there which needs to be scored. And these sentences, actually, they have 6 sentences, and they have one set where the 6 sentences are of the same context. So you have a high context over there. Then they have another set where you have the same keywords. Their sentences are syntactically correct, but semantically not correct. So the context is low over there. The person has to remember what was being present. It calls more for the auditory memory over there because a person cannot make a guess depending on the context. So they test all these aspects, and they also ask the person to rate himself and say how much was the listening effort on a scale of 1 to 10, and for how long can he tolerate the stimuli. So this is supposed to be a test which will check both word recognition as well as working memory, and which should be helpful in identifying auditory processing problem as well as cognitive problems in older individuals. We are yet to see clinically how useful it will be and how it will have an effect on hearing aid fitting or counseling regarding hearing aid fitting. And as we have for children, we also have screening tests for screening auditory processing disorder in adults. And for screening, we can either have checklists or we can have tests. And checklists, one of the common used in India is SCAP, or I think many of you are familiar with SCAP child version. So on a similar line, Yatiraj and the student have come up with SCAP adult version. So this is also available. This is published study, so it can be used by people. And it has a, basically it has 12 questions with yes, no answers. And it taps questions related to auditory suppression or closure, auditory memory, and auditory attention. And a score greater than 6 will actually suggest that a person probably has auditory processing problem. And this has two versions, one which is administered by self, the other one which can be administered by the family members. That is, the family members can report how the processing is, or the person himself can report. And they have done a study where they say that the sensitivity specificity for the self version is better than the family member. But probably sometimes using both is useful because we get additional information when a family member says how well the person can understand speech. In terms of tests, any of the screening test battery, I mean, ideally the tests which we have for children can also be used for adults for screening also. So basically, when you talk of screening version, what is done is instead of having a dichotic digit with 30 pairs, we make it as just say 6 pairs and then check whether a person is able to perform well on this or not. And one of the commonly used in US is the SCAN3, where they have a screening version and a diagnostic version of the test. And screening version has gap detection, auditory figure ground, and free recall, whereas the diagnostic version has more of this. So similarly, we do have tests like STAP developed by Yatiraj and all. For children it is, but I'm sure the same can also be used on adults with the adult norms. And similarly, we do have a screening test in Marathi also, but we've not really tested it on adults. We have norms for children on the screening test. As a part of an ICE research project, we developed a test for temporal ability screening test, and that basically checks a person's ability to identify gaps in noise, duration discrimination, and duration pattern. And this test can be administered on persons with mild to moderate hearing loss also for checking temporal abilities. And I would say that testing this auditory processing abilities is important in adults, especially when people come for hearing aid evaluation also, because we all know that many times we fit a hearing aid and the person is not happy with the hearing aid. So if auditory processing abilities are checked and we do give training as per what problem they have, then maybe the use of hearing aid by adults will increase, because most often we don't really have an adult rehab program. We just fit a hearing aid and we counsel, but we don't really train them with the hearing aid. We already talked about these factors earlier. There are many factors which can affect auditory processing disorder. Assessment of auditory processing disorder. So one of them is age. In terms of age here, adult, I would say that we all know that with increase in age, there is declining capability. So as a person grows old, there is decrease in scores. So that need to be considered when we talk of auditory processing disorder norms for older individual. And the peripheral hearing loss can have an effect because all the central auditory processing tests can get affected by peripheral hearing loss. And we need to ensure that cognition and other things are normal. Education is not really a major factor which will affect because can run the central auditory processing tests on all people with all educational background. Physical status can be a factor more in terms of uh, going through the tests and then the duration for which a person can sit for the test and how, because auditory processing tests do take a long time for assessment unless we do a screening portion. So in that aspect, we may have to look into the physical status of it. And of course, the motivation, reinforcement, associated problems will have an effect because unless a person wants to listen and wants to perform well, a person, because we sometimes you may see that elderly people are not really interested in undergoing the test and then somebody is forcing them to get the test done. So at such times you may get poorer results just because a person is not motivated in performing. He's not really interested in going through this long process of all these tests. And associated problem, like I already said, the linguistic problem, unless a person has good language abilities, will not be able to do many of the tests because majority of our auditory processing tests are speech tests. We do only for the temporal processing, we typically use non-speech tests. All the tests used for temporal processing, like the creation pattern, pitch pattern, gap detection, all that are non-linguistic. So a person's linguistic ability does not matter. But the tests which we use for auditory closure or dichotic tests, all those are dependent on language. So it also depends on how much of linguistic loading is there. For example, if a person's language ability is not good, then a word test may be better than a sentence test. A CV test may be better than a sentence test. So because sentence is more linguistically loaded. And similarly, if a person's memory is not good, then we should not have tests which will expect a person to be remembering more items. Like for example, if I just present a word and ask him to repeat, then a word auditory memory doesn't play a role over there. When doing dichotic tests, I present one word to the right ear, one word to the left ear, and ask them to repeat two words. So yes, the person can repeat. But if I do a test like dichotic digit test where I have digit pairs, I present 2 digits to the right ear, 2 digits to the left ear, then the person has to repeat what is said. So it has to be 4 digits he should be repeating. So then if a person has auditory memory problem, then he won't be able to do well on these tests. So we need to consider other problems before we actually test the auditory processing. So we need to choose the test material depending on a particular individual, and we need to ensure that the test material recording is good, standardized, and we do have good calibrated instrument before doing these tests. I do talk of calibration of instrument, but I also want to say that the auditory processing is something which is not really affected so much by intensity. In the sense, when I talk of auditory processing tests, it's not important that whether I do a test at 40 dB HL or 60 dB HL. It will not make a big difference in that. Most often, all these tests are administered at most comfortable level. So now the trend is going more to say, because can we do all these tests using a laptop and a earphone? Okay, there are studies which show that whether you do these tests in a standard audiometric test room or do it in a quiet room using a laptop and earphone, the results are similar, as long as a person is able to hear it in a comfortable way. But you do need to make sure that if you're using a laptop with an earphone, then you have both earphones are giving similar outputs, the intensity is similar in both. So all those aspects in terms of calibration, we need to check. But it can be done in a single room situation just with a laptop and a earphone also. So now once we diagnose a person has an auditory processing problem, what do we do? Do we have any management for auditory processing disorder? So like we have in children, we have a similar thing. One is, do we want to modify the environment to minimize the adverse effect? Or do we want the person to be using compensatory strategies? So if a person cannot hear well, then does he want to speech read and then understand what is being said? So, so what are the different methods he can use for compensating? Or we have this direct intervention where we can do auditory training kind of a thing and then improve or enhance auditory skills. And like I've been saying for a long time, it was believed that this direct intervention is not really helpful in improving the auditory processing skills. But studies later on showed that yes, auditory system or the nervous system is their plasticity exists even in adults. It will reduce with age, but then plasticity is present throughout a person's life. So if we do listening training or auditory training, a person can improve his auditory processing skills. So we have, like we have in children, different approaches. You can either use bottom-up approaches or top-down approach. And one of the first evidences for this auditory training in adults came from Music et al. Study, where it was a single case study, but on a 41-year-old lady, they did all these tests of dichotic tests and auditory closure tests and temporal processing tests. All the tests were affected. So they did training to improve dichotic interoral difference, auditory memory enhancements, discrimination, temporal sequencing. So for all these, they gave auditory training to improve these skills. And when they did measure after the training, they did observe that there was improvement. Okay, there was improvement in all the test results post-training. So this was one of the first, probably one of the earliest reported in literature saying that yes, auditory training can help in improving auditory processing. So there are not too many studies reported on adults with auditory processing showing evidences of helping in improvement. So one such training is by Anderson et al. Did auditory cognitive training program for older adults. And they again had different modules to improve both speed and accuracy of auditory processing. So they used discrimination, temporal order, repeated sequence, all the training. And finally, when they post training, when they checked, they did find that there was improvement in speech perception in noise. There was improvement both in behavioral tests as well as electrophysiological tests. So they did show an improvement in complex ABR as well as the behavioral test showed improvement. And they did on persons with normal hearing as well as persons with hearing loss. And they found that persons with hearing loss showed improvement in memory, whereas persons with hearing loss showed improvement in both speech perception in noise and memory. Normal hearing people showed mainly in memory probably because speech perception in noise had a ceiling effect. So similarly, in another study, Morris et al. Trained 16 adults, older adults in auditory processing deficits. So they evaluated pre-training all the abilities like auditory closure, dichotic listening, temporal ordering, temporal resolution. And they did give specific training depending on wherever the deficiency was. That is, if a person has problem in dichotic listening, then you train them for dichotic listening. If a person has poor and speech in noise test, then you train them for auditory closure. So like that, they did training and they observed improvement in behavioral measures, but they did not observe improvement in electrophysiological measures. One, it could be because of the age factor also, because the 60 to 78 years, the electrophysiological, I mean, this is my own guess, they didn't give this explanation. 60 to 78 years, the electrophysiological measures would be anyway, there is a, the degeneration would have led to some abnormality in the electrophysiological measures. Maybe because of that, they did not see the improvement, or it could also be because of the duration of training. Like the behavioral measures may show an improvement first, and then if you continue it for a longer time, then maybe there is a change in the electrophysiological measures. At Aish, Ajit Kumar and Sandeep had a project where they developed a software for training auditory and auditory cognitive training. So they developed a software, and through the software, they trained people with hearing loss. They basically took mild to moderate hearing loss, persons with mild to moderate hearing loss, where they had 3 groups. One group they trained only in the auditory mode. One group was trained in both auditory and cognitive mode. And the third group, they did not give training. And they used both again behavioral measures and electrophysiological measures to check if there's an improvement. And they did observe improvement in both groups, and they reported that auditory cognitive training yielded better results than only auditory training. Another study at ICE, this is a PhD thesis of Rania Vaidyanathan under Asha Itinaj. So there she actually developed a temporal resolution training program for older adults, and she did it on older adults with normal hearing. And with training, she did show improvement in behavioral measures, all the behavioral measures. The voicing discrimination, no improvement was seen because it was normal hearing people, so there was already a ceiling effect over there. So in essence, we can say that there was improvement in the behavioral measures. Electrophysiological measures, she reports a significant improvement only in N1 latency. So basically all these evidences, I'm putting it here to show that yes, auditory training does help. So in clinics, when we see patients with auditory processing disorder, we can go in for these kind of trainings. And we don't have to use always a software or a standard software to give this training. Many of the times, like how you develop training material for your speech language disorder cases, you can develop your own language training material and give therapy, and definitely it will have an improvement. And one of the safest thing is it really doesn't cause any harm. So it is either a person will improve with training or may not show any improvement, but then you're not surely causing any adverse effect by doing this training. Okay. But only thing is audiologists should start believing in saying, yes, auditory training will help my clients in improving auditory processing. So once we start believing in it, only then we can convince our patients to say, yes, you need to enroll for therapy to see improvement in your processing skills or improvement in your hearing. So I've just put in 2 case reports which we have seen here. This one is a 25-year-old person who was pursuing post-graduation in medicine, and he had a road traffic accident. It still have road traffic accident, and after accident, he said that he had complaints in difficulty in recalling events and information. Audiogram essentially showed normal hearing with good word recognition score. And when we did the test results, it showed that like duration pattern test showed normal results. Speech in noise test was normal results. Our auditory memory and sequencing test showed normal results, but the dichotic CV test showed abnormal results. Okay, so basically the left ear single correct scores as well as double correct scores were affected, meaning binaural integration is affected, plus left ear processing is affected basically. And there were little abnormality in electrophysiological test is basically the cortical auditory work potential showed reduced amplitude. Otherwise, we could see all other potentials. And we did give training to the person, and because he was a medical student, he did want to improve himself. So, and with therapy, he reported improvement. Unfortunately, I don't have post therapy results, or we couldn't evaluate post-therapy completely to record the improvement. But behaviorally, he did report that there is improvement. Similarly, this is a case with temporal lobe epilepsy where resection was done 6 months prior to the R evaluation, and audiogram showed normal hearing sensitivity. Gap detection threshold was affected. It was more than normally gap detection threshold is should be around 3 milliseconds. It is 9 milliseconds in both the ears. Duration pattern score were as low as 7 and 6 in both right and left ear. Dichotic CV showed poor results. I think both dichotic CV and dichotic digit both showed poor results over here. And speech in noise test was very poor. In fact, in speech in noise with 0 dB SNR, he couldn't repeat anything. So with 10 speech in noise test with a 10 dB SNR, when the speech signal is 10 dB higher than the noise. So with 10 dB SNR, he got a score of 68% in right and 40% in left. So overall, it indicated that there is central auditory processing disorder, and the performance in right ear seems to be better than left. And for this person, we had to go in for both direct and indirect management, where we did give auditory training, but we also had to counsel the family members and the teachers. And he was attending regular speech language therapy also to get an overall improvement in his cognition. And again, the person did show, he was an adolescent person, and he and the parents did report improvement with therapy. So this is in brief about auditory processing disorders in adults. I'm open for any questions if there is any.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for a very, very practical as well as a lecture which gave a lot of theory input as well as practical. I think this emphasizes the fact again that CAPD is not, or CAPD management is not something which is to be left only for institutions. It is very much possible to do it in a routine clinical situation with a laptop and material which are today commercially available or can be demanded or asked from institutions also. So that thank you very much for bringing out that point so beautifully in your lecture, ma'am. We have a
In many
lot.
of it, I want to say that people can develop their own material. I mean, all clinicians have the ability where they can, when we do have facility to record and manipulate the signals easily. So many of the clinicians can do it. It may not be for a study purpose. You need to have an identical stimuli, very, very standard stimuli. But then for a therapy purpose, you can develop material.
So, ma'am, we have a lot of questions.